welcome to another edition of Just Win Today live show, where we're going to talk a little Christmas tournament basketball, and we appreciate everybody joining us. We had another show we were doing just a second ago. Had a little technical difficulty there, but we're back on here, and what we're going to talk about is basically, we were talking about how at first glance somebody might say the area is down this year. Southeast Missouri basketball is not as strong as we're used to seeing. But I would say there's two reasons for that. One, traditionally, Southeast Missouri basketball is really strong, and I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. But then second of all, I don't think it's so much that the area is down right now as much as it is you have a lot of teams who have young players and that are going to be, really good next year. And so I'm going to go through kind of a list here. If you look at the first team that come to mind was a team like yours or like Bell City. Bell City's all freshmen, one sophomore. They're a really young team. They're just going to get better and better. But Cape Central, one of the better teams in the area, they start a sophomore. They got a freshman. It's the first kid off the bench. They've got some kids that are going to be back next year. Cape's going to be good. Bell City's going to be a lot better. Their kids are all young. Scott Central's got kids coming back. Jackson's got kids coming back. Scott City, Oran, Delta, their team is all freshmen and sophomores.
Right.
Hayti, this was supposed to be a rebuilding year. They graduated a lot of seniors last year. Hayti's going to be better next year. Doniphan, Malden, Bernie, Bloomfield, East Prairie. There's another team, almost all, junior impact players.
Yep.
Kennett, I know they start 3 sophomores, young team. Puxico, a lot of young players. Twin Rivers, their best players are juniors. South Pemiscot, young team. Poplar Bluff, the best 2 players on their team and 2 of the better players in that part of the state are juniors. North Pem, your group, young. Risco, their best player is a junior. Clarkton, their best player is a junior. Most of their best players are juniors. Zenith, a lot of young players. Crothersville, and then the best team in that part of the state, they're losing Fred Thatch, but Sykeston's got a lot of young players. They've got a lot of talent coming back. So basically, I think the whole area is going to be better next year, and you're going to get more into years like this. And this is what I mean when I say, this is what fans, if you've been around long enough in Southeast Missouri, you can remember years like this. 1985, Scott Central wins the Class 1 state championship, go 33-1, and their only loss is to Charleston, who was Class 3 that year, really good, but Charleston lost to Malden. Malden was 30 wins and 3 losses. Ray Pugh, Robert Eisen, really, really good team. One of the, really good teams of all time from that part of the state. And this is back during 4-class basketball, remember that. And 86 and 87, this is really impressive to me. Scott Central won the state championship Class 1 back-to-back, 86 and 87. Notre Dame won the Class 2 championship back-to-back, 86 and 87. Charleston won the Class 3 championship back-to-back, 86 and 87. So for 2 years in a row, if you went to the old U-High Christmas tournament at Southeast Missouri State in the old Houck Fieldhouse, you had the Class 1, the Class 2, and the Class 3 state champions in that same Christmas tournament.
Wow.
That's just crazy, back-to-back years. And I can remember the best team. I was a kid then, and that's my favorite Christmas tournament memory is going when we beat Charleston to get into the finals of that tournament. My cousin Terry was a junior in 86 and a senior in 87, and we beat Charleston to get to the finals both years and lost to Cape Notre Dame both years in the finals. And that was Cape Notre Dame with Danny Dohan, Ronnie Wrestle. They were just loaded. One of the best teams of all time from that part of the state. Go ahead to 88. Scott Central wins it in Class 1. New Madrid wins it in Class 2. Travis Day was on that team. Eric Thatch was on that team. Really good team. In 89, Scott Central wins it in Class 1. Bernie finishes second in Class 2. So they're still, state caliber team.
Yeah.
Charleston wins it again in Class 3. You come back in 1990, Scott Central finished that year 33-1. Their only loss was to Charleston, who was 33-0. They played in the finals of the Cape Christmas tournament. It comes down to the last possession. clear the floor out Marcus Timmons against Lamont Frazier, two of the best players ever from that part of the state.
Right.
One-on-one for the game winner. I mean, that's as good as it gets. But, those two teams were really good, and then you had Portersville kind of a year away from being really, really good at that point. And so you come back in 91, Scott Central wins it in Class 1, Portersville wins it in Class 2. Scott Central was 33-0, Portersville's 31-0. They didn't play each other, obviously, but you had two undefeated state champions from that part of the state.
That's unbelievable.
And so, and then Charleston lost a tough game in the quarterfinal that year, or they would have won it in Class 3 also. You come back in 92, Van Buren breaks Scott Central's streak and wins it in Class 1. I know they're not a true Southeast Missouri team, but I'm thinking about the old Bloomfield Christmas tournament. They used to be in that tournament over there, so if you were going to Christmas tournament this time of year, Van Buren was in it. That's when you had Wesley Rodebush's younger brother, Anthony Rodebush, was the best player on that team. So Van Buren wins it in Class 1. Portersville wins it in Class 2. Charleston wins it in Class 3. Portersville, now, like I said, they didn't play Scott Central in 91, but they did play in 92. Scott Central beat Portersville in 92. Then Van Buren beat Scott Central, wins state. Portersville goes on and wins state in Class 2. Charleston won Class 3 state finals that year, 43-19. They held a team to 19 in the state championship.
That's unbelievable.
Game. And then come back in 93. This may be the most impressive one. Scott Central wins it in Class 1. Portersville wins it in Class 2. Portersville beat Scott Central that year.
Yeah.
Charleston wins it in Class 3. Charleston got beat in overtime, and I believe it was the quarterfinals that year, by St. Francis Borgia. Borgia went ahead and won it. So Charleston was within an eyelash of winning it. Poplar Bluff finishes second in the state. They losing the state championship to Jefferson City High School by 4 points. So you almost had all four state champions, Scott Central, Portersville, Charleston, Poplar Bluff. And so going back through it again, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, a 9-year stretch. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21 state champions in a 9-year stretch. So you average more than having two every season. And then, like I said, that's not counting the teams that got there and finished second, or the teams that lost in double overtime to the teams that won state. I mean, you're talking about every year in this part of the state, you had 2 or 3, state championship caliber teams when it was still 4-class basketball. And then really pay attention, like from 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90. You had a 6-year run in a row where the 3A state champion came out of this area. So imagine if Sikeston or Notre Dame right now, because that would be like 4A now, won it that many years in a row. Like if we had a bigger school champion every year. So imagine when Malden won it, like I said, they had to beat those Charleston teams. When Charleston won it, they had to beat those New Madrid teams and those Malden teams. So I mean, just the level of competition was so high. And so, when I go watch the games and I hear people say it, and I'll be honest, I thought it myself for just a minute. Maybe the talent is just down. But I think what it is, it's more so that you're seeing that I think teams are a year away. I really think that. I think we've got some good young coaches in that part of the state. And I think that you have so many teams that are relying on a lot of young players.
Young kids, yeah.
Absolutely. So I think we're a year away.
Yeah. I thought the same thing right after I had graduated in 2008. Come back and just watching games, and it's kind of that deal after you graduate, you're done playing, and you kind of see a lot more than you had saw when you were a player, and you notice more things, and I had mentioned it to somebody one night who is actually Vince Howard, whose son is a sophomore that plays quality minutes at Sikeston, Peyton Howard. And he told me then, and I'll never forget it, that it always goes in cycles. He's kind of the first person that ever said something like that. That, it just goes in cycles where it's good and then it's not as good and then it's good again. And I thought about it, and that's kind of what you're talking about here, and we're about to see one of those cycles come back around where it could be really, really good. And even then, when I thought it was kind of down, we had some of the better Scott Central and Sikeston teams, and even Charleston teams come through during that little stretch. And now we're down maybe a little right now, but like you said, we're young in the area, and it's about to come back up, or it should anyways.
Well, and I think another thing that, has to be said is look at where we're from, just for example, Scott County Central. You had one run at state championships. They won a state championship 12 times in 18 years, which is just unbelievable.
Right.
On 11 of those 12 state championship teams, you had a porter. There was a porter on every one of those teams. Well, then the Porter kids all graduated, and then their kids came back through school. And, Otto Jr., Dominique, Jalen, Jeffrey, and then even Bobby Hatchett. Bobby Hatchett's a porter. There was a lot of porters. And then you had Timmons kids that were on a lot of those first state championship teams. Then those Timmons kids, they had kids, and their kids came back through school there. Drew Thomas is a Timmons. Randy Timmons, you had these families that kind of came back through.
They were all right there together, too.
And they were all right there together, the same age, both times, in the first generation and the second generation. And then you had even some where the Porters and Timmons had kids, like Otto Porter Jr. So,
right.
Like they bred him in a laboratory to be good at basketball. And but basically, you had these teams come through, and then their kids came through, and then they won 6 state champions. Well, there's not any more of those kids coming right now. And so, so if you look on the horizon, it may be a time where you see some other programs step up. When that first run of Scott Central teams, when those kids were all gone, I was at Bell City, and we ended up building a program that went to Final Four 5 out of 6 years. So maybe that's what's also setting up is you're going to set up somebody else. It may not be a Scott County, a Charleston, like we just said. If you go down through there, Charleston won it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 6 years. Scott Central won it 7 years in a row, won it 8 out of 9 years. Portageville won it 4 years in a row there, back in the early 2000s, New Madrid had a really good group. Derek Tipler and Ryland Ranson and Ricky Smith and all those kids came through. Maybe there's another group of kids like what we're seeing Sikeston do right now. Back in those days, these teams that I'm talking about, we're not talking about Sikeston. Sikeston was not a strong basketball program back then.
Right.
They certainly have been for the last decade, like Notre Dame was there for a little bit. I think what you have in common there is 2 things. One, you have a really good coach in Hollifield at Sikeston, or Paul Hale, who was at Dexter. But also you had coaches that were there for a little while to kind of plant some roots and, build a program that was sustainable,
Right.
And, I think that's what we're seeing right now also is we've got a lot of young coaches that are, like we were talking about East Prairie earlier. Casey Knight there, he's been there for a little while at East Prairie now. And they've got some talent coming, and so that's got to be, partly, hey, they've got the kids, but it's also he's doing a good job with those kids, I know we've talked before in here about like Josh Dowdy at Dexter. Josh has been there for a little while now. Well, Dexter's back. They're the 1 seed in Bloomfield again. They're kind of on the way back up. They were down there for a little while. So,
and they don't even have the kids that they used to have. In my opinion.
No, they don't.
Or they used to be. Like, I remember going and playing Dexter in junior high and seeing them while I was in junior high. Those kids were high schoolers, and it was like just so much size. And that, they were tall and good players. And now, they got a couple big kids, but they're not like they used to be.
Yeah, they're not. They don't have the same depth, I don't think, that they had before. I can remember when we were playing against them when I was at Bell City, and they had that run of really, really good teams. I can remember they had a set of twins, and their last name was Christensen. Yeah. And, those 2 kids were very good players, but they were complementary players on those teams. I mean, they were don't get me wrong. You didn't guard them. They bust you up. They were good players. But at the same time, they had a lot of other guys you had to worry about, too, where I don't think they have that same depth of scorers that they used to have. And so,
right.
That's one of the things. But while we're talking here, I'm watching the Bloomfield tournament on TV. I've got it streaming on my Chromecast here. I'm watching YEC, and I'm tell you right now, I am so impressed with Hayti and Doniphan both. I watched the Malden and the Dexter game. Very slow tempo, very methodical tempo, which is fine. Those two teams want to play that way.
Plus, like you said, Dexter doesn't have the scores.
They don't. And so I know they play.
He had to adjust and play a different pace. And
yeah, they play a different style, and both teams played a good game. But I'm telling you right now, this game right here is up and down the floor. And Hayti just had a kid go in and dunk one with two hands. They're up 23-14 with 7 minutes left in the second quarter. But Doniphan has not backed up from them 1 inch. And they are just, coming down and taking it at him. And so both teams, I mean, just back and forth. Doniphan is really not backing down. I actually picked Doniphan to win before when we were talking earlier. And so, I guess I might be able to change that now if nobody heard it when we.
Well, I heard it, and that's all that matters. And I'm only going to say that because I picked Hayti.
Exactly. You did pick Hayti.
So this one's kind of me versus you.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And so, but a lot of good scores from around the state. And like we're talking about, just in that part of the world in southeast Missouri, there's a lot of, and here's another score that just came in. Sikeston won 84-45. They were up 40 going into the fourth quarter with no Fred Thatch.
Thatch, and that was the second round of that tournament.
Yeah, they're going on to the championship without Thatch, and they're just blowing people out. So they're Sikeston's really good. So, but yeah, it's I'm very interested to see. And here's another good example. Doniphan. This is a school that people don't remember. They haven't been as good in the last several years. But I'm telling you right now, there was a time about 10 years ago that
Matt Rogers.
Doniphan was really good. They went through a stretch of kids there where they had a 6'8" kid, then they had a 6'11" kid, and then they had the Rogers kid who's better than both of them, who was 6'10". So they went through a stretch of.
With him, they had those twin brothers too, and they had Adam Carpenter, who's a really good scorer and shooter.
Yeah, and then when they had the other big kids, they had a guard named Adam Karras. And Karras, I'm telling you right now, Hayti and Doniphan, Hayti come down, Doniphan come hit a three. Hayti come back and hit a three. I mean, like 1-2 pass, jump up and hit a three. Doniphan comes back and hits a three. Hayti comes back and hits a three. Now Hayti gets a steal and a run out and a layup, 32-19. They're starting to run away a little bit, and I just remind me never to pick against Aaron Bywell again. So, but their pressure is really
earlier.
Their pressure is really getting to Doniphan because Doniphan's making enough shots, but what Hayti's doing a really good job of is they are turning the ball over and turning that into points. When Hayti grabs it, they're taking off and they're gone. And so this has been a good, and they're just coming down, pulling up. There's another three, and so they're just coming at them right here. But yeah, I think. I'm going to be interested to see how the second half of this season plays out, with some of these teams like we're talking about with young players. I know, like we're talking about Sikeston, they've got young players. They've got guys that are still
and they're out there right now without their most experienced and their best player.
Right. And so I know Cape's the same way. We had talked earlier. Who do you have winning the Cape Christmas tournament up there?
I've got Charleston winning over Jackson.
Charleston over Jackson. And I believe I picked in that one Cape Central beating Charleston. So I think Cape's going to beat Jackson and Charleston's going to beat Cape. So that's going to be what I picked, for that one there. But yeah, it's always a fun time of year. What's your favorite Christmas tournament memory growing up?
And that's tough. And this is kind of something you were talking about earlier with talent and the players and teams and everything. It kind of seemed like that Cape Christmas tournament, that's my favorite too, was so much better when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Even better than when I was in high school playing in it. It just seemed like growing up, those guys were, like the Charleston teams, they were so much bigger and stronger. And you had Kewan Gant, Ashton Farmer, and Lescano Dean, and all those guys. And So I don't have a specific game or anything like that, but to me, it was watching those early 2000 Charleston teams, to like kind of the 2003, 2004 Charleston teams.
Yeah, and I remember when I was coaching then, and we had good teams. We were Final Four bound and state championship winning teams in Class 1. Charleston was going to the Final Four in Class 2, or I'm sorry, Class 3. They were actually, getting up there and almost winning it. They finally did break through and win it. And then you had Class 2, it kind of shifted from different teams. I actually seen that Hornersville made a run at the Final Four one of those years. And then Dexter actually made a run at the Final Four out of Class 4, and they were, Dexter was always down in the Bloomfield tournament, but during those years, Jackson had a couple good teams. Cape Central was down then; they were not as good. And then you had Charleston, like I just said, they were always good. But back then you had a kind of a handful of small schools. We were really good in Class 1. Orem was really good in Class 1. Advance had some good teams, and so there was more of a small schools having a chance. Because, again, Cape was down, which helped, but also we were good. Like we had good teams. A lot of the small schools had good teams. I remember even a year or two prior to that where Advance actually won the tournament with Garrett Brushhouse. And Garrett Brushhouse and those guys, Adam Rainey, they actually won the tournament. But my favorite Christmas tournament memory, I've got two. One from when I was a kid, and that was, like I was saying earlier, Cape Christmas tournament. My cousin Terry's a junior, senior in high school. I can remember going up there when we beat Charleston and just how dang good Charleston was. And it was just like, man, are we going to hold on and win this game? That was when they had a young Lamont Frazier, but Charleston was really, really, really good. Cedric Rogers and those guys. And so we had win that game and then come back against Cape Notre Dame. And like I said, Cape Notre Dame is a back-to-back Class 2 state champions and one of the all-time great teams out of Southeast Missouri, a team that you don't hear mentioned nearly enough. And I tell you what, just those games, just the excitement for those games and how good they were, and like, man, are we really going to win this tournament? There's so many good teams in it. That was a lot of fun being a young kid at Scott County Central. And then my second memory is when I started coaching, and when I got old enough to, kind of start going to some of these games on my own. And of course, I was interested. I remember this was the late '90s. This was late '90s, and I was still in college. And Scott City was a good team. They had John Beck, yeah. They had Ryan Weatherspoon, Tim Lowry. They had a really good team. Well, Portersville, of course, was really good also with Jim Bidwell down there, and they had William Durden, Torrey Saxon. They had a bunch of guys that were really good. Went and played in college. Well, at Christmas time, they had a kid that was getting eligible for second semester, and I don't know how this worked out, but somehow their semester ended in December. Like, they took all their finals and everything, and the first day of the second semester was actually, in December, so this kid could play or something like that. He got to play at the Christmas tournament, but he hadn't been eligible the whole first semester. And this kid's name was Quentin Sykes, who is the cousin or brother. He's somehow related to Antonio Sykes, who's the best guard that's ever come out of Portsville that I know of. And so everybody, the hype around this kid was unreal. Like, you wanted to go see him play because they're already good. And then you're going to add another player, and this kid's supposed to be this good. So I drove down there to watch this game. And when I went down there, he's left-handed, lightning quick. He was a good player, really good player. And, of course, they're going to be better with him. There's no denying it. So I go down and I watch this game, and I'll never forget, I come back to the Cape tournament the next day because at the time I was actually coaching at Cape Notre Dame, I believe. I was a freshman coach there. I think this was that same year. And so they were all the coaches in the room. I was the only one that had went down on that day off to go watch them play. And everybody was saying, hey, how good are they? How good are they? And there's a guy who he still does games on the radio for the Christmas tournament up there, a redheaded guy named Eric Shawn. And Eric's the voice of the SEMO Redhawks and all that. And at the time, Eric was an up-and-coming radio broadcaster, and he was actually the broadcaster for Scott City. And so he kind of had a bias for Scott City. And while everybody was sitting there, you know, running these guys down, you know, hey, how good are they? You know, what's he like and this and that. And I was kind of saying, hey, I think they're going to be really good. And Eric Shawn started talking, and he said, well, if you just break it down and you look at it like this, who's got the better guard? Scott City. You know, they've got John Beck. Who's got the better, you know, bench or whatever? Scott City. Who's got the better? And I'll never forget him saying this, and I don't care if he hears this, but he said, who's got the better coach? Scott City. At the time, Derek McCord was the coach at Scott City, and Derek's a fantastic coach. But I just remember sitting there kind of shaking my head like, I don't know if anybody's ever said that if you're breaking down a, you know, plus-minus column, anybody's ever put Jim Bywell in a minus column before, you know. Like,
right.
I just remember sitting there thinking that to myself going, man, like, you guys might need to go watch them play before you say that. And I don't remember who ended up winning that round of the games between those teams, but Scott City and Portersville, they were in opposite Christmas tournaments. But there was about a 3 or 4 year stretch where one of them had a really good chance at going to Elite Eight or a Final Four, you know. So, but I remember going down, you know, there was kind of that unknown being in that Christmas tournament at Cape and wanting to go down and watch the teams play in Bloomfield, you know. I remember going down and watching Dexter when Brett Hale was a sophomore, and they had a big kid named Mattingly that was a junior. And they had Shannon Wright that was a sophomore, and
Yep.
you know, Dexter was just like this up and coming team, and everybody knew Paul Hale's son was going to be good. It's one of those groups that you'd heard about when they were in 7th grade, when they were in 8th grade, you know, and now they're on varsity, and it's like, man, Dexter's beating everybody, and they were actually playing in the finals against Donovan, where, you know, it was one of those great Donovan teams that they had back then, and so, you know, just the hype surrounding that game. These two teams are really good, and when they drew the bracket, it was a collision course, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And sure enough, it come down to those two teams, and that's what you got to love about this time of year.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, hopefully we can get back to some of that here in the next year or so. As like I was saying earlier, I really believe that a lot of teams are back on the upswing right now, and so a lot of good young players in our area. We hope they all get better, so, you know, in a year or two we can be talking about some of these same games.
Right.
And so looking on the other side of Christmas, you know, what do you think when we come back here?
I think, you know, overall you're going to see a lot of your schools. It seems like everybody's kind of, you know, floating around that 500 or just under or just barely over mark, other than, you know, like a Sykeston. So I think this is where we're going to see some teams really kind of separate and move away from that point in one direction or the other. So we're going to see some teams find out who they are and you know, separate themselves from the rest of the pack in all conferences and classes.
Yeah, I agree. So, and we were talking about different teams, and I'll give you just a couple of teams to kind of keep an eye on here when we come back from Christmas. We talked before about Risco. Risco is a team that can get hot, and so I think that they had a good showing over at that Clarkton Christmas tournament.
Yeah.
When they come back here in January, they start conference play. You know, just being realistic here, comparing them to a team like Scott County, the schedule's probably not as tough.
Right.
So they've got a chance to pick up a little momentum here, whereas compare that to Scott County, who, as we sit here today, is 3-7, and they come back and they're going to play a tough schedule. So the way they finish this week at Cape at the Christmas tournament, I think is important for their team. They could pick up a little positive momentum here, but that's another team. I like we were saying earlier, don't give up on Scott Central just yet in Class 1. Right now, the problem is they really haven't figured out how to score consistently yet. I think if they figure that out in Class 1, they're going to be a handful.
Right.
But at the same time, you got to be careful when you're sitting there with a younger group and you're 3-7, and we both know that schedule. And in the second half, you're going to see New Madrid. and you're going to see Porterville, and you're going to see some of these teams, and so Charleston. And so they've got a really tough schedule coming down the stretch here, and if you're not careful, you might look up and be 4-12 or something like that. So you just don't know which way your team's going to go at that point. So those are a couple teams to keep an eye on. And then I think another team to keep an eye on, I'll give you two more, and they're in the same conference, and that's Boerne and Advance. I think both of those teams, good teams. They got a chance to get hot here, again, with their schedule in the second half. They both play a tougher schedule, and their conference tournament is actually right at the end of January. So from the time we come back until the end of January, they're going to play a lot of meaningful games, and they're going to have a chance to pick up several good wins, both of those teams. And so they could be, we could be looking up a month from today going, hey, Boerne or Advance, either one or both of them in Class 1 and Class 2 have that look, And then I'll give you one more team, and that's Oran. They suffered the injury early in the year with the Priggle kid, one of their best players, and it looks like he's starting to come back and start to play. Yeah. And so, again, they're another team. When they come back here after Christmas, they're going to play a lot of their conference schedule, which they're in a good conference with Chaffee and Scott Central this year. And I know East Prairie's got a good team. You got Delta's got a lot of good young players. They're a scrappy bunch. And so, another program I'd like to see get back, to relevance. They've been down for quite a while. But, again, back in the day, if you just kind of judge off what you're looking at right now, that's the Kelly Hawks. They're the 15th seed right now in that Cape Christmas tournament. They picked up a big win yesterday. But I can remember a time when, Kelly was winning that district, or they were getting to the Final Four of that Cape Christmas tournament. And when you talk about those tournaments being good, right now Kelly's a 15 seed. Delta, like we were talking about, they've been down a little bit. They've got a good young group of kids coming.
Yeah.
Scott City, they're a 13th seed right now. Now, Scott City's been pretty decent the last several years. They have been. But I can remember a time when Scott City, Kelly, and Delta were, three of the – you're playing that second round. There's 8 teams fighting to keep moving ahead, and all three of them got a good chance of moving on to that Final Four. So,
right. And they're in the same conference.
And that's when that tournament was really good, when you had – those teams at the top, the Charlestons and the Notre Dames or whoever, and then you had a Scott Central, you had a Delta, you had a Kelly, you had an Advance, you had an Oran, and so I'm really rooting for Kelly to keep improving, because that's a program with a lot of history, a lot of tradition, and it would be really good to see them kind of get back to those Jimmy Hulshoff and Denver Stuckey and Michael Riley and Glasseter boys.
Head.
They had a lot of good players that came through there. And going even further back than that, you had Kendall Ayers, you had our buddy Joby Holland, one of the all-time greats. That's right. So there's a lot of good players.
My first ever actual other than you basketball coach.
Yeah, that's right. So they had a lot of good players that came out of there. So this time of year is always fun, and there's a lot of good basketball going on this week. And right now, Hayti is just putting it to Donovan. So unless Logan Nutt goes in there at halftime and draws up something that we haven't ever seen before, it looks
he's liable to do it.
It looks like Hayti is just in control right now. So the only thing Aaron needs to go in there and do is say, "Get a drink and let's go back out here." Like, you don't
keep it going, guys.
You're playing so good, you don't even want to talk to him right now. Just let him keep playing. So
don't make him think too much.
So, but yeah, it's a fun time of year. So thank everybody for listening, and be sure and check out the website. The scores that we're talking about on here, they're just constantly scrolling through the website. A lot of scores that come in, they go straight through to the website. So be sure and check us out. And today is actually the 1-year anniversary of Just Win Today. This is 1 year ago today we put our first article out. And in the last year, Just Win Today has hit over 92,000 people, whether it's the articles or whether it's people getting on there to look at the quote of the day or this podcast or the YouTube channel, the videos that we've got out, whatever. Yeah, it's over 92,000 people in 1 year. So You know, the only thing that I hear from that, Tobe, is we still got more work to do. I mean,
more work to do, but
you know,
thanks for everybody that's showing up.
That's right. And so, for all the coaches that do this stuff with us, we appreciate you. The guys that text stuff, send me emails, inbox stuff that, you know, we end up putting on the show. And then, you know, just also people that don't have anything to do with basketball. There's a lot of people that get on the site for other reasons. There's a page for teachers. There's the quotes, the music, different stuff. And, you know, sometimes you get those real neat messages back from people, and they say, that's really what I needed to hear today. That, you know, I don't know why, but I actually woke up this morning. I got a text from a former student, and this person was just like, hey, I just wanted to tell you, blah, blah, blah. It's one of those texts that you wake up to, just makes your day, you know. And so,
right.
So, you know, and that's kind of what the whole point of the website is. We're trying to spread some good news and some positive vibes. So we appreciate all the support and everybody that tunes in and listens to us. Every time I think about that, I still laugh, you know, that many people have listened and read this stuff, because
right.
who would have ever thought it? But it just keeps growing and growing.
Yeah, only way to go is up, too. We're still on the rise.
That's right. So, well, check out the website, justwintoday.com, and we appreciate everybody tuning in. So we'll do this again next week.
That's right.
All right, later.